a measure that is hopefully going to be on the ballot for us to vote on as to whether or not California requires labeling of genetically modified organisms in our food. And I'm not the expert on that, so what I'd like to do is invite our next two speakers up. Both of these ladies have been working very hard in getting this on the ballot so that we can actually vote on this. Next up, I'd like to introduce Mary Graydon Fontana and Patty Bond from the Label GMOs Santa Cruz. GMO-free Santa Cruz.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to come and speak with you tonight. My name is Patty Bond and I'm Mary, and we're volunteers with GMO-free Santa Cruz. Okay, so GMO-free Santa Cruz, our focus is to get labeling for GMO foods on the California ballot next year, and also to educate our community about the health risks of GMO foods. So how many of you are concerned about GMO foods? And how many agree that we have a right to know what's in our food? Are any of you here? Do you hear Jeffrey?
He was here last month.
Well, he was in Santa Cruz, but he was right here, standing here 2 years ago, because I was here. And I was so impressed. And the thing that just amazes me so much about Jeffrey Smith is, despite the fact that he shared with us some really scary information about the risks to our health and also to the health of the environment, he's a very positive person. And he's very humorous, and he's a great speaker, but he was very positive, and he made us realize when we were listening to him a couple weeks ago in Santa Cruz that we are getting very close to a tipping point on this GMO issue. And if we all pull together and work together, we can regain control over our food supply. Probably one of the most important things that we can do. So I think really focusing on getting this ballot initiative passed next year, and I think you can all help with that. So you'll be hearing about that from Mary in a few minutes. But I want to take just a couple minutes and give you a little background so you really understand what's going on with these GMOs. A little bit about what's happening on the global scene, and then Mary's going to talk about labeling the initiative. We're going to speak for about 12 minutes. I'm not a graphic artist, but there it is. Okay, GMO. It's basically when it's a laboratory process of taking genes from a certain species A, and inserting it into a totally different species B. Just so to create a specific trait or characteristic. And it's not the same as crossbreeding. Everybody's heard about that. Crossbreeding is moving genes from one species to another entity, but it's the same species. Genetically engineered, the genetic modification process is an experimental technology that's merging DNA from different species, as I said, creating unstable conditions of plant, animal, bacterial, and viral genes that cannot and can never occur in nature. So GMO food is basically, scientists took DNA from a certain species, usually a bacteria, inserted into the DNA of some food crops in order to obtain a desired trait. And basically, GMO equals genetically modified equals genetic engineering. It's pretty much the same term. So just a quick rundown of Monsanto. Everybody's pretty familiar with Monsanto. Well, you know, their goal is to dominate world agriculture. They're the leading chemical, seed, and biotech company in the world with $10.5 billion annual sales. And they've got a great track record. We know that they're infamous for Agent Orange and DDT. And frankly, you can't trust what they say. They are providing 90% of the GM seeds in America right now, as well as providing seeds to the rest of the world. And they're buying up seed companies around the world to control the world's seed supply. And they patent the seeds so that farmers have to keep buying them every year. And some of the seeds are called terminator seeds, so they're impossible to save and reuse. So it's very, very serious. There's two main types of crops. There are other types of GMO GMO crops, but the two big ones are Roundup Ready and BT crops. Roundup Ready crops have a gene from bacteria inserted into them so that they won't die, the crops won't die when they are blasted with Roundup, which is a weed killer. And so farmers use an awful lot of Roundup on the crops. So the bad news is if you eat Roundup Ready crops, you're not only eating genetically modified materials, you're ingesting also the herbicide Roundup. The other crop, BT crop, has DNA from a soil-dwelling bacteria in it, so the crop itself becomes a pesticide. You have to register your crop as a pesticide with the EPA. So that's pretty amazing. And BT crop, so if a worm eats a BT crop or a BT cotton, gets in its stomach and it bursts out the stomach, breaks open the stomach, and the animal dies. So you want to stay away from that. In terms of the crops, the major crops are soy, corn, canola, cottonseed, sugar beets, Hawaiian papaya, yellow crookneck squash. I haven't had much of that lately, but I am avoiding that now. And alfalfa. And you can see from these numbers the incredible percentage of seeds. This was crops planted in 2010 that are GM seeds. And in terms of ingredients, these very common ingredients are in so many of the processed foods, all processed foods. 60 to 70% of processed foods now contain GM ingredients, according to the Congressional Research Service. So you've got high fructose corn syrup, condensed milk, gluten, citric acid, sugar, unless it's cane sugar. Cane sugar is not GMO sugar. Soy lecithin, vegetable oil, canola oil, all these, baking a cake the other day, my daughter wanted to make a cake, and I thought, oh my God, okay. Check cake mix, I gotta go get an organic cake mix. I got organic canola oil, got rid of the old stuff, but darn it, I couldn't get any of that horrible fake frosting. So I'm looking for that. Yes. Oh, go ahead.
We have these brochures from the Institute of Responsible Technology back there at our table. And this is a shopping tips guide. And one of the things it has in it is a very long list of invisible GM ingredients. So many processed foods. Pick up one of these.
Okay, thanks, Mary. Okay, quickly, human safety. As I mentioned, there have been no long-term studies on human health. There's been a number of animal studies, and a number of problems were found, including allergies, liver problems, reproductive and fertility problems, low birth weight, excessive cell growth in the lining of the stomach. So as far as human studies go, there have been no long-term studies. Back in 1992, the Food and Drug Administration claimed that because they had no information showing that GM foods were substantially different from conventionally grown foods, they said they were safe to eat. And so absolutely no safety studies have been required, and that stands today. And at the time, in 1992, this is really something here, the FDA official in charge of creating this policy was Michael Taylor, the former attorney for Monsanto, and later Monsanto's vice president. And today we have Michael Taylor, who's the FDA food safety czar. So Monsanto and the EPA have assured us that it's only insects that will be hurt by GM crops. But as we stated, it's totally unknown what the health effects are today and tomorrow as a result of GM foods. This is a little bit technical, but I think you'll find it very, very important. The only published human feeding experiment revealed that genetic material inserted into soy, GE soy, transfers into the DNA of bacteria living inside our intestines and continues to function there. So if you eat certain kinds of GE foods, we may still have the GE proteins being produced inside of us, so kind of in effect it's sort of like a little pesticide factory. So the idea of that, when I heard Jeffrey Smith talk about that, that really turned my stomach. That's supposed to be fun, I can laugh now. Okay, in the other human study, it was conducted by doctors at Sherbrooke Hospital in Quebec. The BT toxin from corn was found in the blood of a large majority of pregnant women and their fetuses. And the study showed that BT, there was a belief that BT would break down in the digestive system and kind of disappear. But the study showed that BT proteins survive the digestive process and pass into the bloodstream. And so I've already said that the BT toxin, when eaten by certain animals, breaks open their stomach and kills them. So we've got to wonder what it's doing to us. So basically, Monsanto's position is, as stated in the New York Times in 1998, Monsanto should not have to vouchsafe the safety of our biotech food. Our interest is in selling as much of it as possible. Assuring its safety is the FDA's job. The FDA says, ultimately, it is the food producer who's responsible for assuring safety. So basically, the bottom line, there's no one looking out for our interests except us. Globally, just real quick, this is it's important to note, I think, that the crops that are being used today were not engineered to increase yield. I mean, because some people think, oh, we've got to feed the world, we need more production. They're not engineered to increase yield, and in fact, some of the crops actually have lower yields, in soy, for example. So I don't know if you've heard, but in India, the BT cotton failure has devastated a lot of local economies, and there have been hundreds of farmer suicides. After the earthquake in Haiti, Monsanto donated 475 tons of seed to Haitian farmers. In response, 10,000 farmers got together and they burned the seeds. Yeah. This is impressive. China just suspended approval of genetically modified rice and wheat due to concerns over human safety and environmental consequences. So if China's doing something, it's important for us to pay attention. So basically today we've got 30 plus countries, including many countries in Europe and Japan, have laws mandating that genetically engineered foods be labeled or they're banned outright. So it's time for Americans to step up and take control back over our food supply. Mary's going to talk about labeling and the labeling initiative.
Even though public opinion polls in America show that most Americans would like to know what is in the food that they eat, would like to know if there are GMOs in their food, there is no labeling, as Pat said. We don't have that right. Why not? Why do you suppose? I mean, I guess this kind of helps.
Yeah.
It's kind of a no-brainer. It's really political. Every time a bill is introduced into the legislature, it doesn't go anywhere because the huge biotech companies' lobbies are able to get it defeated. In 2009, Monsanto spent almost $9 million on lobbying for their GMO foods. But as Patty said, GMOs are labeled in 30 plus countries or banned, labeled or banned. And why is it that they are there and we don't get to have that here? It's because of consumer pressure, believe it or not. In 1999, the GMO issue reached the tipping point in Europe. That means that enough consumers didn't want to buy or eat foods that had genetically engineered ingredients in them. The food manufacturers got nervous. They didn't want their bottom line to be hurt. And within a single week, virtually all major food manufacturers there committed to remove GM ingredients. So because our foods are not labeled, how do we know how to avoid eating GMOs if we choose to? One way, of course, is to eat totally organic. And that means you've got to look at all the ingredients and see that they're organic. They're not sneaking something in that's natural. And another way is to eat foods that are non-GMO project verified. Have you heard of that? That's a third-party verification. Testing and verifies that the foods do not have GMOs in them. And this is what the seal looks like. Of course, it's tiny, and it's on the foods if they've gone through this testing. So you can be sure that There are very few percentage of GMOs in these. It's hard to have everything completely clear because of contamination. As you probably know, that's happening some. So this is a way to know that you're eating foods with no GMOs. And New Leaf Markets, by the way, has about 2,000 products that have been verified this way. And you can see when you go in, and I'm really careful to look now, there's that little, I mean, it's little there, and it says the non-GMO project verified on it, if it's been through that testing. We need to get some other stores on board with us. Another thing you can do is you can, there are the non-GMO shopping tips guides that are back there, the brochures. If you use a computer, you can download a shopping guide that actually gives you lists of foods that don't have GMOs in them. And if you don't have a computer, we have some shopping guides that do list it, but it's easy to do that. And this shows you the little seal. You can't see it from here, but it's got what the little seal really looks like. Okay, so that's that, but what about all the thousands of foods that we don't know about? Don't we have the right to know what's in our food? Yeah. So since the 1990s, we've repeatedly asked the FDA, the USDA, our legislators, the courts, to mandate labeling of GMOs on foods. Have they done it? No, it's not happened. So we're taking things into our own hands, and that's where the initiative process comes in. Here in California, we're lucky we can do that. The people can vote this in if we can get it onto the ballot. On November 9th, the Grassroots Committee for the Right to Know submitted the California Right to Know Genetically Engineered Food Act. They submitted it to the Attorney General for the title and summary. And if it's passed, it would require labeling of foods, GMO foods, and foods with GMO ingredients. It would enable citizens to choose whether they want to buy and eat these GMOs or not. And it would allow health professionals to track potential adverse health impacts of GMO foods. What it would not do is it would not ban GMOs in California. It would only require labeling, because what that does is that gives people a choice. Some people don't care, but I really care, and I think most of you care, and we want to have the right to know. So that's what it does. How many of you would like to see this on the ballot and get it passed? Yeah. You want it banned? I know. That's the first step, and the other thing is that we're hoping that the same way that it happened in Europe, you know, the tipping point, that, and Jeffrey Smith said this too, if the food manufacturers get a sniff even of people, what do you say, 5% if their bottom line is not going to be fulfilled, they lose money, if there's any even a sniff of that, that's going to make them want to take that out of their foods. And we're hoping that'll happen. Okay, so we need to get it on the ballot. We're pretty much all volunteers. We were told that there are going to be a minimum amount of paid signature gatherers, but it's mostly going to be volunteers because it costs a lot of money. And if it gets on the ballot, the biotech companies are going to come in with millions. So we need whatever money that we can get. But we need help to get the initiative on the ballot. So these are some of the ways that you can help. First, educate yourself and others about the GMO issues. We have brochures and flyers. You can go on the websites that are listed on the flyers and brochures. That's a really important step because we need to do a lot of outreach to get people aware. So when this does, it's going to get on the ballot. They'll know what we're talking about. So we need people to volunteer to do outreach at farmers markets and other events. And mostly we're going to need people to gather signatures for the initiative. And we figure that's going to start in early January because we have to get the initiative back. And we need about 500,000 to 800,000 signatures, and that's going to take a huge army of volunteers. So that's mostly what we're trying to do now, is to get people educated and get volunteers that are going to be willing to do that gathering. And there is a training for it. It's only about an hour, just to be sure it's being done legally. And then we have a sign-up sheet back there. And this is to get updates from GMO Free Santa Cruz. GMO Free Santa Cruz is just one of the groups from around the state that are working towards this. So if you put your information on here, you'll get our updates and newsletter, and then you can choose any activities or any way you can help just by contacting us. And I guess lastly, what we want to do is we want to reach the tipping point here in California, and one of the ways you can help do that is to buy organic foods, to maybe ask at stores, you know, do they just have GMO ingredients in it? You know, and if they don't know, well, you know, just to get that out there. Choose organic foods, avoid foods you know contain GMOs, and choose foods from the non-GMO project that are verified by that. We want to show the food manufacturers that we're going to stop buying the foods that are genetically engineered, and that is going to get them upset and scared, we hope, and then the tipping point, we hope. So.
Are engineered to produce an insecticide, an inside us, an insecticide.
I'm looking at the food that's in the grocery store. They say it's safe, everybody eat more. On second thought, I don't really know if it's made with those GMOs. So I'm looking for the non-GMO label. Before I bring it home, I'll put it on the table. I wanna know if it's verified, so I don't harm myself with genetically modified. They don't want you to know. Poison they grow. Profits that show. From those GMOs.